Hello and a very warm welcome to you today to this ministry channel. Hope you're all doing well. This is Richard in the UK. I want to talk today about the rapture and about the timing of the rapture and how close we could possibly be to the rapture. Before I do so, I just want to thank each and every one of you who have posted positive and kind comments and supportive comments. They're a blessing to this ministry because it means that the Holy Spirit is blessing yourselves. And we do keep a list of all the prayer requests. So anyone who requires prayer, please just put it in the comments and we will pray for you. So we are praying for those of you who have asked for prayer. We are praying for you. It's a little ministry team here of my wife, my daughter and myself. So we are praying for you. Okay, so today I want to, because this channel is about, this ministry is about the rapture, the pre-tribulation rapture, the end times, Bible prophecy, as well as looking at the accurate doctrines that we need to adhere to and to abide in. Because, as I've said many times, over many generations, the church has taught false doctrines. For this particular message, I want us to look at the rapture and the timing of the rapture. And you'll know if you've listened to previous messages that I've done on this ministry, that I've taught that I personally believe in a Feast of Trumpets rapture. A Feast of Trumpets rapture because God has fulfilled the four feast days of the Lord in the spring season. They've all been fulfilled in order. The Moedim, the appointed times of the Lord, and there remains the three outstanding fall feast days to be completed, and the next one is the Feast of Trumpets. And I think that the next major prophetic event will be the rapture, the pre-tribulation rapture of the bride of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, so I want to give us a bit of an update of where we're at right now, 27th of August 2024, and a couple of things that I think need to be shared in terms of the understanding that I have and where that might help us to have perhaps a deeper understanding of what's going on. The first thing to say is that when we look at prophecy and when we look at God's timeline, we have to always look at Israel. Israel is the heartbeat of God's prophetic timeline. Now, where are we right now with Israel? Well, we all know that they're in a war. They're in a war with Hamas in Gaza. And we know that there is a war going on. It's not yet reached to the extent of being an all-out war, but there is still a war going on to the north of Israel with Hezbollah, who are a terrorist organisation operating out of southern Lebanon. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with events that are going on. And we know that this war has escalated during the last 10-11 months, and particularly the last few weeks it's escalated quite seriously because Israel has assassinated leaders in Hezbollah and also the Hamas leader as well that was in Tehran. You may be aware of that one, and that has led to Hezbollah making more threats and sending in larger barrages of rockets into parts of Israel, particularly to the north. And Israel's responded, and as you know, I mentioned, didn't I, and it was on the news that Israel performed a preemptive strike last weekend against Hezbollah, who were going to send approximately 6,000 rockets into Israel. So we know that this is an ongoing war of sorts, a tit-for-tat war, and the chances are that it will escalate in the near future. Now, what we have to understand is this, that Israel at the moment, not only is Israel facing war to the north, and obviously the situation in Gaza to the west, which is a particularly messy situation. It's a complete mess there, really. But also we must draw our attention to what's going on in the West Bank, inside Israel, in the areas of Judea and Samaria. Now, for some of you who are not too familiar with that setup, there are Arab Israeli towns and cities in Judea and Samaria under the authority of the West Bank, under the guidance of Mahmoud Abbas, who has his Palestinian Authority operating out of a place called Ramallah. And for some time now, for a few years, you may have heard on the news about the situations in some of the camps there, terrorist camps within the West Bank, like Jenin and Tulkram, and so on and so forth. And periodically the IDF have had to go in and destroy the operatives there, the terrorist Palestinian, pro-Hamas terrorists. And so there's been conflicts going on inside the West Bank over a few years, and it's getting worse and it's intensifying. And this is important because we have to, in order to understand prophecy, in order to understand the timing of the rapture, I've said many times before, we must understand the conditions on the ground in Israel. And last night there was a breaking news story that Israeli air forces had struck from the air and killed half a dozen pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian terrorists on the ground in the town of Tulkram. And there's continual fighting going on. And the IDF are doing operations constantly in the West Bank because the West Bank has been fueled with weapons. They've received weapons from Iran through Jordan and places like that. And so there is a terrorist organization fighting from the West Bank inside Israel. And Hamas repeatedly calls upon supporters of what they call the resistance to uprise, an intifada, to come against Israel and the Jews and to cause problems from Judea and Samaria and the West Bank. So Israel has got this tremendous problem very, very close to the heart of Israel, Jerusalem, in the West Bank, where they've got, Arab Muslims, Palestinians, who want to destroy them. So there's continual violence and conflicts going on, repeatedly stabbing attacks and all sorts of things, violence against the Jews going on in the West Bank. And, this is a situation that we have to understand when we talk about the timing of the rapture and prophecy. And it fits in to our understanding of when the tribulation will start. Now, I said about a month or two ago, I said that the tribulation will not start in 2024. And I totally believe that. Absolutely, it won't start this year. And let me explain why. The tribulation starts, okay, many people teach that we're already in the tribulation. We're not in the tribulation. The tribulation starts with the signing of a peace covenant, the confirming, the making stronger of a peace covenant between the Antichrist, who will be working on behalf of Israel, and a group of nations, almost definitely those surrounding Arab nations around Israel, making that covenant of peace with Israel. Okay, it's going to be an extension of the Abrahamic Accords. It's going to be based upon the Abrahamic Accords, which was made back in September 2020 when Donald Trump was president of the US, and that involved Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco and Israel. And it's going to be along those lines, but it's going to be a much broader treaty, and it's going to be a much more significant treaty because it's going to be a treaty which will affect the whole area, and there will be more countries involved. Now, the heart of the tribulation covenant, the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 9 verse 27, this covenant with many, centers on the provision for the Jewish people, for Israel, to build a third temple in Jerusalem, most probably on the Temple Mount. Now, in order for this covenant to be signed, Israel has to be in a position where they will be able to build that third temple. Right now, that is utterly impossible. Why? Because the Arabs and the Palestinians in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in Judea and Samaria, they control the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is under the stewardship and authority of Jordan, but they will never ever at this stage allow the Jews to have their third temple. It's an impossibility. And this is why Israel will be entering into another stage of war. The conflicts in Israel are only going to get worse, because Israel has to be in a position of strength. Israel has to conquer and defeat its enemies, and that will include the enemies in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. They have to be defeated, just as Hezbollah will have to be defeated, and also Hamas in Gaza. And one of the reasons I say that is because at the time of the signing of this covenant, which starts Daniel's 70th week, the time of Jacob's trouble, that's Israel's trouble, the 7-year tribulation period, Israel will have to be dwelling without walls, bars and gates. In other words, Israel will have to be in a position of security. Israel will have to be safe. Israel will have to have defeated its enemies. There is no other way around it. We see, don't we, some of the violence perpetrated by the radical Islamists on the Temple Mount. When the Jews go to the Temple Mount over the last several years, they have been throwing rocks and bricks from the Al-Aqsa Mosque there on the Temple Mount. And these same extremists, Muslim extremists, Islamists, who hate the Jews so much, they will have to be eradicated. They will have to be taken out of that position for a third temple, a Jewish third temple, to be built. What we do know is that certain ministers from the Knesset, very much on the right side of the coalition, people like Ben Gvir, are going up to the Temple Mount more frequently, and the Jews are going there in greater numbers, and they're also trying to persuade the government to allow the Jews to pray on the Temple Mount and so forth. Okay, so that's the setting that I want to set for Jerusalem and for Israel and for where we're at right now. Now, the rapture and the timing of the rapture. The tribulation cannot start until there's going to be a far greater level of bloodshed, as I've said before many times. There's going to be far more bloodshed in Israel itself before we get to that position. So it's not going to happen this year. There's not enough time for these events to take place. If we follow a Feast of Trumpets rapture, which I personally believe is what God is going to do, we must understand that the rapture, the problem we've got to look at, see, many people have taught that the rapture happens on a Feast of Trumpets, which I agree with, and then 10 days later perhaps the tribulation will start on Yom Kippur, okay, because that would be the next feast day on the Lord's calendar to be fulfilled. And I used to think, well, maybe Feast of Trumpets rapture and then tribulation starts 10 days later. But recently I've come to the realization that that's highly unlikely. Let me explain why. Firstly, you're talking about two huge events. The rapture will shake the world. That's the first thing we must understand. When the rapture takes place, it will shake the world. And it will be something which will be talked about, and there'll be the obvious excuses the globalists will give, and so on and so forth. But it will shake the world, and many people will have questions, and many people will be left in confusion, you see. It's going to be a massive event which will shake the world. And there might well be some destruction as well with that. Now, to imagine then that just 10 days later, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the peace covenant is signed. Just a very short time. 10 days is very short. And we go to another huge event, the signing of this peace treaty, which will be global world news. It will be massive on the world stage. Those two events would be so close together, I find unlikely. I find difficult to match up. But also what we have to remember is this, that the Antichrist, who confirms the covenant to start the tribulation, the bride of the Lord Jesus Christ at the rapture, must leave before the identity of the Antichrist is revealed. And I find it very difficult to believe that up to a point of just 10 days before the tribulation begins and the covenant is signed, that the bride is still there up to a period of 10 days, because the process of the peace agreement will already be in process. That peace agreement won't be just signed overnight. It will be a process that's gone on over a period of time. So the world will know that there's going to be this peace agreement. The world will know that certain individuals are working on this peace agreement. So it's highly unlikely that the bride, which will be there up until 10 days before, will not have an understanding of who's going to confirm the covenant and who the identity of the Antichrist is. So I've come around just my understanding, not dogmatic about it. You can have a different understanding, but I've come around to the understanding that there's going to be a time gap between the rapture and the tribulation starting. Now, to suggest that there might be a year's gap between the rapture and the tribulation starting, I think is quite logical and quite feasible. Now, we know the tribulation is not going to start this year, okay? Because there's too much to go on. There's just too much that needs to be done. What if the tribulation starts next year, 2025? Does that give us enough time for Israel to wage war, to fulfill the Psalm 83 war, which is to destroy the ring of fire, the enemies around her, to sort out the Hamas situation, to sort out Gaza, to sort out Hezbollah, to defeat Hezbollah, and then to sort out the problems in the West Bank? Yeah, I think so. I think it's possible. I think it's possible that by next September 2025, that Israel will be ready to make that peace agreement, which will start the tribulation period. In which case, there's a good chance and a good possibility that the rapture will take place this year, will take place on the Feast of Trumpets this year, which falls between the 2nd and the 4th of October. Now, I'm not saying for sure. I'm not dogmatically saying, yes, definitely 100% the rapture's happening this year. I don't know. But I think it's possible. Very possible. And there's another reason why I think it's possible, and it's this. Is because if the tribulation doesn't start next year, 2025, as I've just discussed, then it would have to start the following year, 2026. That's 2 years, over 2 years from where we currently are. And remember, the tribulation, now just concentrate now and really home in on what I'm trying to explain here, because it's very, very important. If the tribulation was going to start in 2026, in other words, go on for another, we've got another 2 years of what we're witnessing right now. The tribulation is God's time to deal with Israel and the Jews and to bring them back to himself. Okay? So the way I'm thinking is that when you see the chaos in Israel right now with the wars, when you see the political chaos in Israel right now, what's it going to be like in 2026? If we can consider how bad it is already, it seems difficult to think that the tribulation can't start for another 2 years. Are you following me? Because look at the state that Israel's already in. Look how bad it already is. There's confusion, there's mess, there's wars, there's internal political divisions, there's violence everywhere. The country is in such a difficult position already. And events are not going to improve. They're only going to deteriorate in the next 2 years. So where's Israel going to be in 2 years' time? And so I kind of think that, next year makes more sense for the tribulation to begin. I think it's difficult to see how the tribulation won't even start until 2026. I think it's more plausible that, they're going to go through another 12 months of real difficulties, Israel. We know that. But it's more plausible that the tribulation will start in 2025. And so that brings me back to the timing of the rapture. And if the rapture is going to happen before the tribulation, obviously, and, 10 days is just too close, and the rapture is more likely to start the year before, then the rapture could very well start this year. Could very well happen, I should say, this year in October 2024 at the Feast of Trumpets. So if you remember from one of the teachings I did recently, I mentioned about peace and security, that this is what we now have to look for. If the rapture is going to happen in 2024, we've got to look for the words peace and security to be spoken by world leaders, by government officials, by those that we see on the television screens. It's going to be a cry for peace and security, as Paul mentions, doesn't he, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. Now, some people teach that the peace and security is talked and spoken of when Israel is in a position of peace and security, when there's peace and security within the land. In other words, Israel doesn't have any troubles. I disagree with that position. Personally, I believe the peace and security is because one of two things. Either Israel's already in an existing conflict which is escalating out of control, not just Israel. I think it relates to two scenarios in the world, on the world stage. The one with Russia and Ukraine and NATO, now listen carefully, and the other setting in the Middle East with Israel and with Iran and with Hezbollah and the proxies of Iran, which are waiting to attack Israel. And I think the peace and security, which will be shouted out throughout the world, as it were, will come at a time when either Israel is about to enter into that conflict, and also that Russia is about to enter into a nuclear conflict with the NATO. And we're hearing that now. And this is another reason why we need to look at this month of September coming now and really think, is this the time? Because what's happened in Russia is very important, and what's happened with Ukraine. As you know, Ukraine have gone into Russia, and Putin is now, and it's been 2 weeks since they've invaded into Russia and in the Kursk region, and Putin is now starting to make nuclear threats. And this is very significant, and it's something we need to be aware of. He's now talking about nuclear threats. Only yesterday, the heaviest bombardment that Russia's given out to Ukraine was conducted. Many very, very serious missile strikes upon Kiev and many Ukrainian cities and infrastructures. So much damage was done that half of the Ukrainian population were in the dark yesterday evening. Okay, it's a very significant development. Because you've got to remember this, that Ukraine has received advanced warfare military technology, including F-35 and F-16 fighters from the West, from America and from the NATO countries. And so Ukraine is emboldened, and Ukraine is striking Russian bridges, and Ukraine is striking at the heart of Russian oil departments, oil depots and infrastructure. And Ukraine has stretched itself so much forward that they've actually sent drones to the outskirts of Moscow. They've been attacking Moscow. And of course what this does, it gives Putin the green light, you could say. It gives Putin the excuse, you could say, the reason to say, right, okay, enough is enough of this. Ukraine are attacking us on our soil. They're attacking our towns. They're occupying our towns and villages. They're hitting our infrastructure. Right, enough is enough. We're going to do something about this. And so I believe that Putin is very close to activating nuclear weapons. And could this be part of the peace and security which is cried out? Could it be that things escalate to the point where everybody's saying peace and security, and with Israel as well, things escalating with Hezbollah, things are escalating in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, and Iran are now threatening Israel with an attack as well. Iran is still saying that they're going to attack for the assassination of Ismail Yahya, who was assassinated in Tehran about 3 weeks ago. They're still saying that they're going to attack for that death. So is it possible that we're going to hear peace and safety? Because either there's a build up to two massive wars breaking out, one in the Middle East with Israel and one in Ukraine with Russia and NATO, or is it that the war's already started and everybody's shouting peace and safety because the wars have already escalated and started, and at that point when people are shouting peace and safety, at that point when people are shouting peace and security, at that point that the rapture takes place? So I think we need to look at these situations right now. This is how I understand what's going on the ground in Israel, on the ground with Ukraine and Russia and NATO, and on the ground surrounding Israel and what's going on at the moment. And we know that things are escalating, tensions are escalating. And so we need to look for those words, peace and security. When there's a cry for peace and security and peace and safety, then we will know, if that happens in the next 4 weeks, 5 weeks, we will know that this is the time that the Lord will come for the bride. Any thoughts? Welcome. Any comments? Welcome. I'm just giving you today an update on what's going on. The tensions are rising all the time, both in the Middle East and in Ukraine with Russia and NATO as well, and how that fits into how I perceive the peace and security and the timing of the rapture, bearing in mind that I don't believe at all the tribulation is going to start this year, and I've given those reasons for that. But could it be that the rapture happens this year on the Feast of Trumpets and the tribulation starts a year later, 2025? I don't know. But if we start to hear peace and safety, then I think there's a fair chance that this could be the year that Jesus comes for his bride. There we are. I hope this update will be helpful. And any questions you may have, please get back in touch with me. As I say, I'm not setting a direct date. I don't know. But this is my understanding, and I think it's important that we share these things. And hopefully it will be of benefit to you and perhaps raise some questions that some people might have. There we are. Until the next time, God bless.